All right, welcome to the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Darish. Joining us from Canada, the homeland of Iowa winner Ted Cruz. He's a Latest.com staff writer and a contributor issue hawk. From Toronto, Eric Carrier. And he's a military vet and Latest.com senior political analyst from Pittsburgh, Josh Patton. And he's a 24-year veteran of the U.S. State Department. The author of We Meant Well from New York, Peter Van Buren. Well, last night the first votes were cast in Iowa, and we'll talk about the Republican race in a bit, but let's talk about the shit show that was the Democratic caucus that was decided by a bunch of coin flips. So just to explain, because the media has really kind of muddled this up, each precinct gets a certain amount of, not delegates, not like Iowa has 50 delegates, you get a certain amount of delegates. You get statewide delegate equivalents, because why wouldn't you want to make this whole voting thing as complicated as humanly fucking possible? So in 6 of these precincts in Iowa, there was a certain amount of people that showed up, which means the precinct gets a certain amount of delegate equivalents. And during the night, some of these people left because, they have lives, so there were extra delegate equivalents hanging around. And to determine who gets those, they flipped a coin, because why not? And Hillary reportedly won all 6 coin tosses, overcoming 64-1 odds. So if the, elusive coin toss vote had swung the other way, we'd be talking about a big Bernie Sanders win right now. Peter, what does it tell you about the state of American democracy when key races are being decided by heads or tails?
I weep for us. There's a video on C-SPAN of one sample Iowa caucus. Actually, it's one where Sanders people are claiming there was some fraud. And it's just absolute chaos. It's people shouting at each other and raising hands and counting things. And it's utter chaos. And at the end of the day, to wake up this morning and find out that they were tossing coins to decide our democracy. I mean, give me a break. Goldman Sachs did not give Hillary all that money to risk it on a freaking coin toss.
Josh, Peter makes a good point. We were watching last night, and all over the state there was these groups of people huddled in different parts of gyms and churches. Is this really the way we should be picking nominees in 2016? And is Iowa really the best place to set the stage for the primary season?
The answer to both of those questions is a resounding no. And first, I think just to give it some perspective, I mean, the coin toss thing is ridiculous. But remember, this isn't really democracy in action. This is a party affair. This is, because it's a caucus, the state election board has nothing to do with anything that happened last night, which is, again, why you can have coin tosses in a race that, they would have at least needed one recount, if not more. So I think that what we're seeing with this sort of outcome is why caucuses are just stupid. I mean, they sound great, they sound great in theory. A town gets together, they talk about candidates, people flip sides. But when they were, broadcasting live from the caucuses, I forget which network it was, but one of them, I think it was MSNBC. And one of them they were just listening in to a caucus discussion, and a girl said the VA was fucked up. It was hilarious. But before that, they were talking about things, and the people who were stumping for Bernie Sanders were like that kid selling you the smartphone that has no idea how the smartphone works. I mean, they were just saying things to convince the person in front of them, regardless of whether they're true or not. Say what you will about elections, but, you at least go into the voting booth with the information that has come out, instead of having someone on site going, no, actually this is true, and it's not. So I think caucuses are ridiculous, and if this is an evidence of why, maybe it does say something bad about what passes for democracy in America right now.
Yeah, that clip with the girl saying that the VA is fucked up is all over. I don't know if they have the full one with the kid explaining Bernie Sanders' tax policy, and he's literally just saying these buzzwords that don't even fit into a sentence. It's just infuriating. And meanwhile, on the Republican side, they all went, they put in a little thing, they vote, everyone's happy, we know of a winner within an hour. So just vote. Eric, do you want to jump in?
Yeah.
I disagree with some of Josh's points. I think the caucuses are ridiculous as well. I'll admit that. But I think that they do have a large bearing on the election, because let's say Sanders did win last night with a decent margin, and maybe that momentum would have carried forward. And we don't know, it still could, but it could have carried forward in a more meaningful way to the further ones. But it also means that maybe now Americans say, oh, Sanders didn't do well enough. Okay, just time to go with Clinton. Let's just concede. And now maybe we'll be stuck with a Clinton presidency, which is even worse in some ways. Secondly, I still can't believe that in the modern technological era we live in, we can't form some form of online voting yet. I mean, with all the security we have in place, you're telling me that we can't set up an online voting system, or even for caucuses or for the real election. It's dumbfounding that we haven't done it yet, because there's so many laws or so many rules that bar people from voting that would love to be able to vote, or people that, like Igor said, have lives and don't want to wait hours in a line. And we shouldn't be discouraging people from voting. Igor, you disappeared, by the way.
Or just the insanity of people counting hands and counting ballots like this is like some sixth grade student council election.
Yeah.
In shower bins.
Also, we do our taxes online in the United States. We apply for unemployment and food stamps online in the United States.
With our Social Security numbers.
With Social Security, those of us who have any money do our banking and our investing online. I mean, this is not rocket science. And yet,
I can't. I'm sorry to cut you off here, because this is a topic that aggravates me. I just cannot believe when politicians say, oh, it's for safety or for the legitimacy of the election to make sure there's no voter fraud. There's not going to be any voter fraud. Like you said, if people are willing to manage millions of dollars of their money online and investments and stuff with no fear, but we're so afraid that one extra vote gets cast through some system, like it's not.
I think we're convoluting. I mean, on the Republican side, they just go in and they vote, and then they count them, and that's who wins. And the Democratic side, they don't do that. They huddle off to the side, and then they yell at a bunch of people who don't agree with them to agree with them. It's not really the same as voter fraud.
College student problem. That's like a liberal privilege.
You're back to this other idiocy double idiocy in the United States. I mean, first of all, the fact that we're allowed to have 50 systems, and some of them, like Iowa, appear to be shit that people made up while they were stoned. Hey, dude, what if we do this? Yeah, I got this great. What if we play Pink Floyd and everybody gets in a gym and talks? That would be, so that's one. The other is this amazing insanity of voting that doesn't, particularly count in the end, because it's all based on delegates and things where it's this mysterious, complex process. I mean, even like in the 1600s, people had better ideas about how all this was going to work. And so we have these systems that are almost, designed to be manipulated by people, by making the rules to the point where people don't understand them. I watched CNN last night, and say what you will, the one guy they got on there, John King, appears to be one of the few sentient people left at the organization. And I was still sober at that time, and I couldn't really understand how this system was supposed to work, and to then come back and draw any kind of realistic conclusions from it, and then to find out it's all a coin toss. I don't know. Bernie should have won.
Well, regardless of who won by 0.2%, Iowa doesn't have a lot of delegates. They're going to be split more or less evenly, so it's basically a tie between Sanders and Hillary. But
yeah, that's one thing
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say that's one thing that I'm sort of surprised about is that, I know we need
Josh
to be made on either side, but it was a tie. It was a tie. Oh, sorry, man. I was just saying it was a tie, and I don't know why we can't call it a tie.
Exactly.
I think a tie for Sanders is still a success, though, considering the underdog candidate story that he's overcome through this entire process. Still a success, but I just feel like he did, in my opinion, win. And because of a couple stupid coin tosses that somehow all six went in her favor, it's odd, and it's a little fishy at times. I'm not suggesting it was fraudulently happened. It's just bad odds, but
hell yes it was. No. I mean, this is like the end of Rocky, right? I mean, where Apollo Creed wins on points, but everybody knows it was Rocky's victory.
Yeah.
And that's why this is important. Because as Josh pointed out, and I would have loved to see Sanders take a pop at her, but, what, as Josh pointed out, the number of delegates involved here is tiny. It's about 1% of the total that's needed to nominate. So it doesn't matter in that sense, and neither does New Hampshire. What matters in these early contests is what Eric was referring to: momentum, publicity. This put Bernie Sanders onto the mainstream media. They can't ignore him anymore. People have to listen to what he says. I suspect he's seen an uptick in volunteers. He's seen an uptick in donations. It also pokes another hole in this myth of the invincibility of Hillary in 2016. And so there's a lot going on here. And sure, who gets those delegates is not what matters here. So I think it was a technical win for Bernie, win on points, if you'll pardon the multiple layers of puns there.
Already on TV, they're playing Bernie Sanders rallies live like he's Donald Trump or something. So obviously, in just 12 hours, we've seen a huge land shift. Josh, what do you think? Do you agree that tie he's in Nashua, I believe. Do you believe that a tie for Sanders is just as good as a win?
Yes, especially in Iowa, where Hillary really staked her campaign. Like she pretty much bet her entire campaign on winning Iowa, which is precisely why I think they declared victory before it was called. Because if they didn't, they would have had no justification to go on. So, and again, I'm not saying that it was something deceptive. They all have their own decision desks, as it were, and I imagine that it was either a mistake or a miscalculation or something. Or just that it's hard to predict Iowa, even if you're using high-tech statistical models. I do think this will help, but I don't know if it's going to help that much, because Bernie is going to still win New Hampshire like he was always going to win New Hampshire, and Clinton is still going to win South Carolina like she was always going to win South Carolina. The question is if she ties Sanders in South Carolina, I don't know if Clinton will make it to Super Tuesday, frankly.
Well, right now Sanders is polling well over 20% in New Hampshire. Do you think that he can pull off a win that big, Josh? And if so, then how does that change the dynamic going into Super Tuesday? Mind you, one or two more debates after this week.
The debates are, I think, huge. They cannot be understated, the importance of them, especially if Clinton comes off looking bad or like she's lying, or if Bernie ends up looking bad somehow by, getting impassioned about a topic and then looking like he's being a dick to Clinton or something like that. So the debates could, again, throw a wrench in everything. But I do think he can pull off a pretty big win in New Hampshire. But remember, if he was polling 5 points over Clinton and won by 10, that's a story. But if he's polling 20 over and then wins by 10, he underperformed. See, so that's sort of how the narrative fucks everything up when you're looking at primaries, because there's two stories. There's the story we're telling ourselves about the candidates and what's happening on the trail, and then there's the path to the nomination. And Hillary Clinton already has a third of the superdelegates. And so she has an advantage in the nomination part of it. So those are the two things to be watching. What is unfolding on TV, that's nice, and that's the interesting story. That's what we'll remember. But it's the delegate counts and the path to actually getting, and the number, of course, is escaping me at the moment, but the number they need to win the nomination at the convention.
Well, Peter, Iowa, New Hampshire, these are states where these guys spend 7-8 months just trying to court every single voter. Now it's going to get really fast, and then come March 1st, it's just all the states going. So do you think that a win in New Hampshire, a tie in Iowa, can help propel him to win some of these places where he can't spend all this time trying to compete for voters?
Well, that's the big money question. The expectation is he's going to win in New Hampshire, and he should win, easily. Somehow that doesn't happen. That's a huge change. The real question is going to be how much momentum he can carry forward and what that's worth. We all know Hillary has the ground machine. She has extraordinary amounts of money. She hasn't even started the serious mudslinging that is always part of her campaigns against Bernie. It's question. I don't know what she's got to sling there, but she'll find something.
Probably the socialism angle.
I think it's that
She
folk
can do
album
that.
he made.
What's that?
He made a folk album a while back. That's pretty good.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. I'm sure there's some like groovy pictures like from the '60s with him with long hair and stuff
And he
like
still
that.
looked like he was 70 in them.
And the question, is whether all the punditry about who Sanders' base is going to hold up or not. I was reading an article today that was suggesting that his strong play is with white people, and obviously Iowa is pretty white as states go. That Hillary generally is favored to carry more of the African American vote, and that'll take her through South Carolina and the South in general. I hope that Bernie gets the momentum he needs here. It's going to be very, very difficult to beat her at the core game, which is, as Josh was pointing out, the delegates. I mean, there's a very good chance Hillary is just going to sit back and say, fine, you bastards, don't vote for me because I've got this gamed out and I'm going to get the delegates and, we're keeping score out there. We know who you are. With your so-called message votes for Bernie, we'll be watching.
Well, the race was pretty close in about every county, every possible statistic except one, which was voters under 29. Bernie Sanders won 84% of voters under 29. Josh, do you think that he can continue to bring out enough young voters? Because clearly he's resonating and then some.
I think that yes, I think he can, and I also think that Hillary Clinton's attempts to connect with sort of the youth vote, whether it's trying to yuck it up with Lena Dunham or dancing on Ellen or whatever she thinks works. I don't think that that's sort of going to play well. Whereas Bernie, just sort of like what what Barack Obama did when he was running in 2008. It's the message. Like, you get all hyped up about the message, make it seem really important. Give them the "We are the people we've been waiting for" line, and you will own young people throughout the election.
And then you lose the election.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, Obama was able to turn them out. If Sanders can't turn out the youth vote, at least to match where Clinton is stronger, say in African American communities, among like middle-aged white women with college educations, things like that. But then again, who knows? The demographics can shift because on the Republican side, that was sort of the interesting thing about the Trump's coalition of actual voters was that they were all over the place. So, maybe if Sanders is able to somehow break through the sort of demographic politics that we go through, he may not need to rely on young people so much, but his message still needs to resonate and energize people. But staying on message is the thing he does best.
I think
going back to this rallying the youth thing, I mean, there's a long history of that in presidential politics, and that's why I cut in and said, and then he loses the election. I mean, you go back into the Vietnam era, and you had Eugene McCarthy, who inspired the youth, and who did he lose to first?
McGovern?
I think it was he lost out to McGovern in the primaries, and then Nixon goes on to win the general election. We can skip around. Ralph Nader was a perennial candidate for president, energized the youth, never got anywhere, probably played the spoiler a few times. I mean, Ron Paul is a perfect example. There was even this guy named John Anderson. He's kind of a trivia question answer right now, but he ran as a third-party candidate in the Reagan-Carter election. And again, it was very popular on college campuses, had a message, and like I said, disappeared. And remember his name because you might win something in bar trivia night from it. So the difference. Obama is a little different in the sense that, remember, he was running after George Bush, and so he was, really, he was going to win. A Democrat was going to win that. And Obama brought out a huge percentage of African American vote that normally doesn't come out. He crossed over into young people, women. I mean, there was so much groundswell to elect somebody who wasn't George W. Bush that we got to give him a half a pass in this whole strategy. I have this worry that Bernie is just going to be another one of these. What he started out to be. He started out, I think, to be a message candidate. He was going to run for election long enough to get a little national attention, get his points on income inequality out there, maybe pull Hillary a little left, and then he was going to, fade away. And I suspect that is what we're going to see, particularly as we roll through Super Tuesday.
I have a question then for this, or maybe it's a comment to add on. I would say that I don't think Bernie Sanders will be a message candidate because, and maybe I'm speaking because they're unborn in, but I would like to think that students today are a lot worse off in the modern economy, and that's not delving into economics, but school is a lot more expensive than it used to be. Baby boomers just won't retire, and so I think students today have a lot more to gain through a Bernie Sanders presidency than they ever could gain in a Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Good point.
Well, Eric, I mean, I don't know. I feel like what Peter was talking about is this narrative. We've kind of been sold by the media that a guy that far left can't be elected. But Eric, you write for presidentialpost.com. What does Bernie really have that big an electability problem that it's going to be such a huge disaster if you beat Hillary?
I don't think so. Like, we've talked about this on the podcast before. In no way would he ever be able to pass everything he's proposing, but I don't think it's unreasonable for him to get a watered-down version of something he wants. When I've been looking at the polls over the last couple months to years now, you can see just the gradual rise of Bernie Sanders. At first, he was a nobody, polling very low, and everybody was like, well, who's this guy? But then gradually, he would take 10% here, 10% there, to the point where he got on par with Clinton. And in some polls, he passes her. It's a back and forth, but it's one that Sanders really has gained a lot in, and I don't see that momentum slowing down because of the nature of his campaign. He's not like a flash-in-the-pan candidate. He's all about momentum, getting young people invigorated to vote, getting young people to think about politics, challenging them on critical issues. That's not what Clinton does. Clinton is, I'm establishment Democrat. I don't really take a stance on anything. She doesn't, and that's where Sanders can really gain when he pushes those issues.
Well, they always say that Sanders is too far left. He alienates a lot of people, that not enough people will vote for him. Josh, isn't Hillary Clinton one of the most polarizing people in the country that carries her own baggage? And isn't Sanders going to be able to bring in some of those, especially male voters that wouldn't vote for her but wouldn't vote for a Republican either?
That's always hinky area when we talk into like who people would vote for on those sort of odd metrics. But you're absolutely right. Hillary
just as polarizing as the idea that Bernie Sanders is a socialist.
Yeah, I would say absolutely yes. Because and if you look at what it's been since, the rumors began when she resigned her post at State that she was preparing to run, there was the Benghazi thing, and then that gave birth to the email scandal, and now that's its own thing. And the thing that's always kind of stunned me about this is I've never understood why people hate Hillary Clinton so much. She's really just a boring centrist sort of career politician. Almost like sort of a generic kind of character, I think, in American politics. And the only thing that separates her from anyone else is that she was also a first lady. So I never understood why people hate her so much. But at the same time, she is immensely popular. Like, the people who hated her in 2008 and have hated her since she was, in China talking about human rights, or in Arkansas, doing what she was doing down there while Bill was governor. I think that she is capable of overcoming that, but that's the kind of thing she can do only if she's not significantly challenged within her own party. I mean, that's why the Clinton campaigns have always been terrified of their primary challengers. I mean, you would think after 2008, as soon as Bernie came in, because, I mean, we've been covering him since he announced, so I guess my view is a little not what everyone else has had, but, I mean, I feel like he's always been there beneath the surface, and it's always been kind of real. And I can't believe that she didn't get out in front of that after what happened in 2008. That astounds me. So, you know,
We lost Josh again.
not that great of a. Oh, she's not that great of a candidate in terms of campaigning. I don't know why she is seen as the obviously more electable choice than Bernie. I mean, they're both tough to sort of sell to people who aren't already agreeing to vote for a Democrat. But I don't see how either of them are very different in terms of being scary to Republicans.
And to piggyback on your comment a little bit, I mean, Bernie Sanders, by today's standards in most of the Western world, like especially if we look at Scandinavia, he's a modern liberal. Like, there's nothing outrageous about what he says. It's free healthcare. That's something that most people should be okay with. Lowering the cost of education or making it free, that's okay. It's just for some reason in the United States, we see somebody like that as scary because, it may cost a little more on taxes. And yes, if you implement every plan, there's obviously costs associated with it. But if you do it properly, it's something that betters your society and actually turns you into the world leader you try to portray yourself as.
Josh mentioned superdelegates before, and it's going to be an interesting part of this election because, I mean, obviously the Republicans would love to have superdelegates because some of them want to stop Donald Trump or Ted Cruz. But the Democrats actually can if they're that scared of Bernie Sanders. And so far on the Democratic side, these superdelegates, which are free to support any candidate regardless of the vote, they're not surprisingly lining up behind Hillary. Peter, isn't the Democratic establishment going to have a lot to say in this, even if Sanders vastly overperforms his expectations?
Sure, and we've seen a lot of that kind of meddling going on already, particularly with the scheduling of the early debates, where the Hillary-Bernie stuff was buried in the deadlands of early Saturday nights and holiday weekends and things like that. Bernie is an interesting character, and he reminds me of the wrong guy in the right place. Hillary is not well liked. She is a very soft candidate. The people that support her almost in a defensive way. Vote for Hillary so we don't have President Cruz. That type of thing. There's no enthusiasm there, and her negatives run steady with her positives. People were desperate for an alternative, and unfortunately, fear of Hillary just pushed out a lot of people. Elizabeth Warren, for example, Kirsten Gillibrand, who would have been awesome candidates and probably will be awesome candidates in 2024. But they got frightened about Hillary's sense of inevitability. And so the only person who was there to satisfy this building need for something new was Bernie. And due to his age, his unmediagenic looks, he's sort of gentlemanly in a very rough game. He's really not the guy we needed to stand up to Hillary and represent this electable other way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Peter, again, an older gentleman, kind of perceives Bernie a lot different than, maybe me or Eric, because there is something of a generational divide there. And by the way, you said Elizabeth Warren would be a good candidate in 2024. She'll be older than Bernie Sanders by the time that rolls around.
She'll be 74, 75, roughly.
I don't have to bank on that.
Age is just a number, young'uns who haven't paid your student loans off yet.
Well, age is a number that can be quantified as 84% of voters under 29 are going for Sanders right now. Josh, how big of a role do you think the superdelegates will end up playing if Bernie does get on a roll?
They'll play a significant one. Again, it was because the thing about the superdelegates is, I remember when it became an issue in 2008, Barack Obama's campaign made a lot of hay about it being undemocratic and subverting the will of the people. then as the superdelegate fight went on, because most of them will not commit to vote for anyone until the end of the primaries. That's sort of why Hillary Clinton was going around before they started saying, I can count on your vote, right? You know? So since most of them don't decide till the end, a lot of times if there is a groundswell of support from the people for a candidate, because they're politicians first, they will be like, the candidate that wins, this is my guy or girl. So I don't know. I mean, if Hillary Clinton continues to court them while the primaries are going on and having success at it, it could be a significant barrier for the Sanders campaign to overcome. But whether whether the Democrats or the Republicans, in order to stop Trump or Cruz, are seen as subverting the will of their voters and their base, they've just lost the election for probably the next 2 cycles. Maybe one cycle if you get a really good replacement in there to fix things up. But to have a brokered convention and seemingly go against the will of the voters, that will cost you the election in that moment.
All right, well, Peter mentioned President Cruz, so let's talk about him. Donald Trump did say that he's going to bring out voters who have never voted, and he was right, except they voted against him. Yeah, there was 60,000 more voters in Iowa on GOP caucus last night than the previous record high, and there was more evangelical voters than ever, which helped Cruz defeat Donald Trump. Everyone thought the higher turnout would help Trump, but Eric, is Trump rallying more anti-Trump voters right now than his own supporters?
I'm not really sure how Trump's going to fare, because I want to see at least 1 or 2 more primaries to make that decision. Iowa is a tricky one. They voted the wrong Republican, 2 years in a row now, or how long has it been?
Well, this would make it number 3.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's number 3. Because as sad as it is, okay, the current state of American politics, when you're thinking that Donald Trump will be a better candidate than Ted Cruz, and both are equally batshit crazy, you know you're in a pretty bad position if one of those people gets elected. I'm terrified for you guys. I'm glad I'm up in Canada. I don't have to use the argument that I'm going to run to Canada because I'm already here.
Yeah, thanks for the Canadian.
Yeah, get some rooms ready, buddy.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't want you. Get out, you immigrants.
Voter turnout aside, Josh, isn't the biggest problem right now the inexperience inside the Trump campaign? I mean, it's nice that he's doing well in the polls, but his ground game last night in Iowa was crap. They don't do any internal polling, and there was a report that he was mocking the other candidates for doing their own internal polling, saying, why do it? The TV guys will do it for free. Well, this is why.
Yeah.
You got the Cruz campaign, which is just obsessed with analytics. You got Rubio's campaign, which is stacked with these experienced establishment guys. Can Trump really overcome that kind of, what it really takes to build a campaign?
I mean, I think that sort of what happened with Trump, because again, when we last spoke on this podcast, I was 100% certain Trump was not just going to win in Iowa, but he was going to level, just kill in Iowa.
Straight polls heading into the caucus.
Yeah, and I think that shows sort of, again, Eric's absolutely right. Iowa is weird and crazy, and so, a lot of people probably felt a little weirder about voting for Trump in front of their neighbors than they would have, say, in a voting booth. I think New Hampshire will also be a very significant test for him. That said, I do think it's encouraging. I think it's encouraging that even though, Ted Cruz is at his heart almost as bad as Donald Trump, or just as bad, depending on your point of view. But he hides it better, you know what I mean? But I still think that it shows that that the voters themselves were maybe not feeling as caught up in the Donald Trump maelstrom as, those of us who write about politics every day and think about it more than people should. So I'm hoping that that's just what it was. We couldn't, he was just like this beautiful unicorn who came into the middle of, some very public place and just started taking a dump for 8 straight months. And we couldn't stop watching. We couldn't stop it and we couldn't stop watching it. But, when it came time for whatever was supposed to happen in the square to start, they cleaned up the crap and kind of did what they were supposed to do. I also think that the Rubio stuff is impressive because Rubio, he overperformed, and that's because, a lot of the other candidates either weren't, the people were just changing their mind because it was obvious they weren't going to win. Ben Carson all but suspended his campaign by going to Florida today to get a fresh set of clothing, as if they did. Yeah, I mean, they don't have stores. They don't have his size in stores in New Hampshire, I guess. But I think that it was interesting to say that the Republicans, this Trump dominance was not as big as we thought. Because a lot of the evangelical support, they jumped to Rubio, not a lot, but a significant amount, bolstered Rubio's numbers too, in not wanting to vote for Trump. I mean, 2 Corinthians might be the most important fucking thing he said in the entire campaign, because it showed them they're like, huh?
And the collection, the communion where you.
Oh God, I love that story. That makes me so happy. I can't even tell you.
Although, I did like Ann Coulter, and I hate to say that, but her comment about Rubio winning the participation award was pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, look, she knows what she's doing.
Oh, I hate Ann Coulter, but I thought I do. Was kind of funny.
I think that Trump in New Hampshire is really, really more important. If he kills it in New Hampshire, then we know when people go into a voting booth and are alone with their thoughts, they're thinking Trump. If they don't, if it's like another Cruz victory or another sort of 3-way split, then it shows that the Republicans really are torn about where they want to go. And that while Trump has a certain appeal, even Republicans who have crazy ideas themselves know that that's a bad idea. So I don't know. I'm looking at it optimistically because, I have to live in the world either way.
Well, we've been consistently wrong on Trump. I mean, we have, the rumors of his death have been greatly exaggerated by us again and again and again. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go into the fray one more time. and
once more into the breach.
Since nobody but us keeps track of how wrong we are from week to week. But I mean, I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of the amusing Trump show. There's a point where even psychotic Republican voters start to think about the reality of electability. The reality of this guy out there representing us on a world stage, things like that. Trump has ran a campaign where he just basically says anything he wants, and he gets media coverage for that. He skipped the last debate, and he held his own weird little ceremony thing there. Nobody walked away from that impressed by him. I don't think that helped him at all. How much it hurt him is arguable, but certainly I don't think it helped him. Going up there to New Hampshire where you've got a bunch of people who are, this is not their first rodeo. And Trump just going up there and bullshitting around in the snow is not going to impress anybody.
I don't know. I mean, it's been very they're impressed in the polls. I mean, he's leading in the polls by way bigger margins than he ever led in Iowa. Yeah. And I mean, we talked about on the Democratic side, it's a very white state. There's, even at its peak, the turnout is like 20%. Eric, isn't this more of an anomaly in Iowa? And now that, 65% of evangelical vote is like, that's Bible Belt numbers. Is it, when we talk about the rest of the country, New Hampshire, some of the big states like New York, California, it's really not going to be that big a deal.
No, I don't think so. And I'm driving the point home that the Republicans have been wrong about Iowa for a long time. So I think we'll see Trump kind of come back to the spotlight, but maybe he'll come back a little more humble now. I don't know. I saw that. Huge, exactly.
At the same time, Josh, here we saw the non-Trump voters kind of rally around Cruz and a bit about Rubio. I don't think they're going to do that around Cruz. Do you think Rubio would be the guy that can come out and really start surprising? He's your guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I do think that I pegged Rubio first as being like the smart choice for Republicans. So, already that had a lot against him. But I do think that especially, when it gets down to these states that aren't Iowa, when it gets to like South Carolina and even your blue states like California, New York, which don't matter in the general, but carry a lot of weight in the primary process. So I feel like Rubio or whoever, if Rubio slips up, whoever the not crazy choice is,
he's the only one.
relative
None
to,
of these other guys are
Republican
gonna be
definitions of
it's
it.
not going to be Kasich.
Yeah, who is there? Kasich, Bush has a surprising rally, which, I mean, even McCain's comeback wasn't, he came back from the dead and he was not doing as poorly as Jeb Bush, so it has to be Rubio. But, I'm hedging my bets because, 2 weeks ago you were clouding me. You're like, Rubio's a buster. But I do think... Yeah, well, I do think that he has really been drowned out because the adult voice in the room, I mean, if you look back to 2012, we paid attention to Herman Cain, Newt Gingrich, Michelle Bachmann, Santorum, all these other assholes. And then, by about Super Tuesday, we were like, oh yeah, Mitt Romney, he's the guy that won't kill us if he's elected. So I think that's probably that might be what happens when it comes to what happens with Rubio. But again, Trump is just if he dominates New Hampshire and is able to get back that the spotlight, because when he's in the spotlight, you can't. I don't think you can beat him. I think it's only when people aren't looking at him that in the voting booths and the caucus rooms that you can break through to actual thinking about who you want to run your government.
And I think Trump's going to start spending money now. I mean, before he was kind of running, he was spending money, but not as much as he could be. And I think now you're going to see it's coming all out. And that's where Cruz he started running a couple of attack ads right around the caucus, and the one about Trump calling Iowans stupid and celebrating abortion, right? Most sensible people can see through that, but the average voter that doesn't really care and believes everything they see on TV, they're going into the voting booth with that in mind. So you'll see some smear campaigns from Trump against the other candidates, for sure.
Marco Rubio certainly outperformed expectations the most. He finishes a point behind Trump. Peter, do you think that's because the closer the...
And I think that's what's important coming out of Iowa. I don't mean to interrupt you, Igor, but I'm just saying I think that is what's the most important, because as we mentioned before, it's Iowa is useless except for the fact that it creates the narrative going forward. And so I think of all of them, Rubio's coming out of this with a bigger bump, and people are looking more at him, and Trump has to get that spotlight back or he might be finished.
No, what was interesting was, the polls were right. Rubio wasn't getting a lot of support, and the exit poll shows that most of the people that voted for him actually came around in the days leading up to the caucus. So, Peter, do you think that as the voting grows nearer, people get a little more pragmatic about who they want to support?
I think there's something to that. Trump is great entertainment value, and people in polls are going to be very enthusiastic about the last shiny object that was held in front of them. And so that accounts for it. The other thing, let's not forget, Rubio did a really good job in the last Republican debate. With Trump off the stage, not sort of sucking all the air out of the room, Rubio had a chance to talk a little bit, to make a few points in a semi-rational manner that he couldn't do when Trump was up there. And I think it'd be very surprising if Trump skipped any more debates going forward, let's put it that way. But, Rubio may now feel a bit more empowered. He did something that worked in that last debate. Now he's got something that he can try again and see where it takes him. I don't know how Cruz is going to play up in New Hampshire. He's got that sort of folksy thing that he does, and
he has been
dragging
second pretty consistently though behind Trump.
Yeah. I mean, but he drags a lot of his sort of Tea Party-ish baggage up there with him. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I mean, Rubio becomes the safe choice, the conservative choice. Not conservative politically, but conservative in terms of how far are you willing to step out there on the Republican side. And that's, as Josh was saying, that's what happened with Mitt Romney. These things sort of have a tendency to settle themselves out. It'd be surprising if it settled out this soon as New Hampshire. But again, this race so far has been remarkably untypical and in many ways unpredictable. So, the weeding out process may happen a lot faster than we expected or in previous races.
Well, Well, the difference, I think, between Mitt Romney and now is he really wasn't facing that many serious candidates. Like Newt Gingrich was legitimately and Mike Huckabee were some of the more serious, not Huckabee, Santorum was some of the most serious competitors to him. Here you have Bush, you have Christie, you have Kasich, who, they tank in Iowa, but they're pretty legitimate candidates. And when you go into New Hampshire and some of these big states and you see that Rubio is really the only one that's really making any headway, isn't the establishment kind of going to cannibalize itself? Like, especially here in New Hampshire, where they're fighting it on tooth and nail between these four establishment guys for the establishment wing. And isn't that going to prevent someone like Marco Rubio from maybe performing better than he would with those guys in the race, Josh?
Possibly. I think the other thing that is sort of bad about this is that New Hampshire and Iowa aren't all that different. I mean, with the exception of corn, I mean, they're basically the same place. And like everyone talks about, like, I mean, well, yeah, they're not as religious, but no, they're not. But the thing is they're not like these serious political arbiters of what's to come. Their participation is just a hair above Iowa's, and that's abysmal at around 20%.
But
obviously last night,
go with,
not
the
the exception.
Guy like McCain, Romney, those type of guys. That's
it does seem to be a more sort of rational kind of place, but as you said, Cruz is a steady second to Trump, and with the Cruz doesn't just appeal to your Iowa evangelicals. I mean, Glenn Beck loves him, and people respect Glenn Beck as like a learned kind of guy. So Cruz is in there really good, and so I think he is. I think Rubio, what he needs to do is he needs to paint Cruz as establishment, because he is. I mean, he's just crazy, but still, he's worked for every branch of government. He's in deep with political money, Harvard educated. The fact that Cruz has been able to successfully sell himself as an outsider that way is interesting, especially if, to appeal to New Hampshire, he should play up his Ivy League background and, the fact that he was a clerk for the Supreme Courts, because that would be respected there more. And so he's either going to flip-flop that way, and that opens up a weakness, or he will continue to just be, barnstorming Teddy Cruz coming in to kick out your immigrants and end your birthright citizenship. And I don't think that'll play well in New Hampshire either.
Well, I don't... What did you say that last part?
I was saying that with Ted Cruz, he might have to try to sell himself as more establishment to gain on Trump. And he has really the background because he went to Harvard.
Game, though. He's like true believer Ted Cruz. He's the true conservative. Yeah, he's, what was he? To God be the glory was the first thing he said when he walked out on stage last night. So, we've seen Iowa. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's his probably what he's going to do, and that's the only other thing he could do is double down on what he's doing already. But I don't think that will play well in New Hampshire. I think we might end up with, Trump, Rubio, and Cruz, with Cruz being a more distant third than he'd like to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Unless he tempers his message.
Yeah, we've seen in the last two Iowa caucuses we mentioned before, you got Huckabee and Santorum. It's basically the kiss of death caucus because none of those guys go on to win it outside of a few Bible Belt states. What makes Ted Cruz's platform any different from those two guys, Peter?
Well, Cruz is tapping into a bit more of a broader swipe of Republicans, I think. He plays up, and particularly in Iowa, his evangelical side and everything. But as we've pointed out, he has a broad background in government, and he's not going to flip-flop, and I certainly don't think we're going to hear him talking about Harvard very much. But he has the ability to kind of hint at there's more to it than what he is. He's not as cardboard as one trick pony as Huckabee. I mean, Santorum, I don't know what he really was in favor of. His policies were all kind of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, seriously. I mean, and that negative thing can only take you so far when you just go out and bitch about everything other people have done. So I think Cruz has got a little more depth than maybe we give him credit for. But he's got a decent opponent in Rubio if Rubio sticks with this. Cruz has got to go very light touch on his immigrant kind of roots for fear of reviving all the silly Canada stuff. I mean, Rubio's got that great personal story. Well, no. I mean, Ted Cruz has silly. Canada itself, I have great respect for it as one of our states. But I think with Rubio, he's got that great immigrant story. He's young. He's mediagenic. You could see people saying, "Well, I don't really like him, but he's not crazy." So, I could vote for him if I was a Republican.
And one of the big advantages he has is that he's campaigning against an elephant who immediately came out and went as far as you can go on immigration, being like, "Fuck immigrants, put them out." So then he could dial it down and be like, "I'm more modern immigration. I don't like it, but I'm not going to be like, take them outside and shoot them kind of thing. I'm going to be more like, I'll legally process them and get them out of here."
Yep.
Which then...
That's not true at all. I mean, Ted Cruz also wants to build a wall. It's on his fucking website. He says they're going to build the wall.
Crazy. Yeah. No, I agree. But I'm saying compared to Trump, he's quieter about it in the sense that he's not like lambasting it over and over and shouting and being loud. Yes, he wants to.
Well, that's why.
But he's
that's kind of why he shut up and why he never attacked Trump on immigration when everyone else was attacking him, because his plan was basically the same, maybe a little more harsh, because, Trump never really defined it. He actually thought down, and I'm imagining laughed evilly as he thought about deporting, millions of people and ending birthright citizenship. So
they were friends at one point, Trump and Cruz. They were buddy.
Yeah, well, and that's because they were two peas in a sort of xenophobic pod. So I think what happened is everyone else was attacking Trump on immigration, and Ted Cruz was always able to make it about something else because, and if you remember, like the first debate, whenever it would talk about immigration, he was perfect. He would go, "I agree with Donald, but this is what I would do," and that's sort of why.
Villainizing Trump.
That's how he's been able to do it, because everyone thinks immigration jagoff Trump, and Cruz is kind of snuck in under the radar, being worse. And I think that's what he's trying to do, because he does sound like a guy, because he mentions the Constitution competently, talks about arguing in front of the Supreme Court. I mean, not just anybody can do that. Well, actually, yes, but you get my point. I think that. I don't know. I think that Ted Cruz is much better at being a chameleon politically than, say, Trump, Santorum, or Huckabee.
I think it's interesting, since Trump brought up this issue of Ted Cruz being a Canadian citizen. The people that Cruz is trying to appeal to with the immigration stuff seem to be the ones that are taking note of that. There is a significant 20-something percent part of the Republican Party that does see that as an issue. Peter, do you think that that's going to hurt him going forward? That the people that he's trying to woo over are like, "But you're not even from here."
We'll see how much legs it has. I mean, the birther thing obviously continues to this day with Obama, but how many people that truly A, believe it, and B, are actually active voters, and C, would even consider, supporting Obama anyway. So, the folks who are way, way out there on these things, they're going to either not vote at all, which is fine for Ted Cruz, or they're going to end up having to vote for the wackiest candidate that's out there. There's nothing to this Ted Cruz being born in Canada thing. There's no air in it.
It's all about perception.
Well, it is. But I'm saying it can be countered because there's no reality with it. If there was, a shred of reality, I mean, with Obama, there were the crazy pictures of him wearing the turban thing, and his name is Barack.
He has a weird name.
But if Obama can get elected on Muslim claims, which is a lot more damaging than Canadian claims, I think
it's true. It's like it's Ted Cruz is secretly agreeable.
He may be reasonable after all. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to affect him seriously, and certainly I think if it narrows it down, Rubio's not going to touch that shit. It's just going to make Rubio look as wacky as Trump and the other birther type people, and it certainly won't come up. I mean, Hillary won't go that direction. There's nothing to it. There's no reality behind it, so I don't see it as a big deal. Cruz has handled it well by essentially ignoring it up till now. Trump says something, a bunch of pundits write silly articles that oftentimes are wholly misinformed, and then it goes away again.
Well, on the other side, with Trump, I don't think the loss last night was that surprising, because you look at the last Des Moines Register poll out of Iowa, and half the voters said that they have an unfavorable opinion of Trump. And, sure, he leads with something like 30% in all these polls, but that the other half of the Republican Party wants nothing to do with him. There was another poll just among all the U.S. voters, 60% of American voters don't like Trump. Can a guy like divisive inside his own party like this really win enough delegates in a 50-state contest to actually be the nominee this time around? Peter, you don't seem to agree.
No, he didn't win in Iowa. I mean, that's kind of a bad start as you go there. And it's very, very hard to see his non-message play outside of his little coven of followers. And certainly once the media starts to turn its attention to other candidates, particularly Rubio and Cruz, if he steps up his game a little bit. Trump is a creation of the media because media loves these kind of stories. They love this bombastic stuff that Trump pulls. He's always been a media guy. He's had his own TV shows. He was always sort of a walking little reality figure of his own, with his goofy hair and his bluster and everything, going back into the 80s. And this is just a continuation of that. The other thing I suspect is at some point when the spotlight starts to turn off of Trump is just going to say at some point, fuck this. I had a lot of fun, but as soon as it stops being fun and it starts being work, I'll just go back and make money on real estate and incestuous weird photos of me and my daughter that are circulating. I don't see Trump having the interest or the energy to go all the way with this and do the things that have to be done, the handshaking and the glad handing. And when people start trying to pin him down on things, and he actually has to start thinking about what he's saying.
Josh,
I forgot about a hidden candidate, though.
What's
I
that?
forgot about Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we did it.
Yes, I did.
Josh, we have shit. Eric threw me off. God damn it.
Yeah.
Can Donald Trump overcome all these unfair when his own party hates him? We saw just last night pretty much a late surge of anti-Trump voting. Is this going to happen to him more often than we think?
What's interesting is that if he would be the candidate that, while dominating the Republican-only polls, would start in the biggest hole of any Republican candidate from a general election perspective. Now, again, Trump has proven that he can sort of overcome those kind of poor expectations and in ways that are not only mind-boggling, but also somehow the most offensive things he could possibly do. But again, that works. Primary politics is different than general election politics. People paying attention to the general election politics, I don't think they're not going to appreciate Trump's I'm a fighter, fuck you strategy the way Iowa and New Hampshire Republican voters do. In fact, I don't even know if regular primary voters outside of the early states will do it. Like, remember, Iowa and New Hampshire, they get all riled up about this because they have it in their state for a year and a half before an election. Everyone else, the rest of us, we get 3 months, from now until Super Tuesday is done. So for the rest of us, I don't think that Trump has, or not Trump, I don't think that Cruz or Rubio has the kind of spotlight skills that Trump does. If the media does continue to show Trump all the time, it will inevitably make him win. But I don't think it's fair to call him a creation of the media, because the stuff he's saying is resonating with people, like it or not. It is landing with people, and it's tapping into something that they're pissed off about, whether it's, all these people with different levels of melanin in their skin, or just that, their wife annoys them and they can go to the Trump rally and get 3 hours apiece. I don't know what it is, but it's tapping into something. So I think that
narrow demographic.
I think that it is indeed. I think that Trump, there is a sort of intangible, unknowable thing about Trump that you can't really see how it's going to play out until the election day. I mean, the caucus is always hard to predict, and it's always goofy, but the Trump thing is an X factor that I don't think we know how to solve for yet.
Well, and something interesting, too. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
I mean, the big weakness with Trump is he's only got one thing, one song. He's Trump. And he's Trump screaming about Mexicans. He's Trump screaming about this, that, and the other thing. There's no depth there. There's nothing about him that's going to sort of unfold as the campaign goes on. People who are interested in a little more depth, they're not going to find it there. And once the media is given a new story to play with, in this case, we'll say the rise of Rubio, then they don't need Trump anymore. He can just kind of wither away, and we had our fun with him, and now we're moving on to something new. So anyway, sorry, Eric. Thank you.
Well, I was just going to say one thing that maybe could be an advantage for Trump if he can escape and get the nomination is some Democrats, and even some people I would talk to in the United States, they will not vote for Hillary, and they said that they would rather vote for Trump because that's how much they dislike Hillary. So maybe that's something that he could play up to his advantage too, if ever he could escape the nomination process alive. I'm not saying it would be a lot of voters, but there are people that do legitimately dislike Clinton enough that they may either not vote, which hurts the Democrats, or vote for Trump because he's goofy enough and, he's not really a Republican. He's just a guy that wants to do his own thing.
That would be a hell of a campaign. Hillary saying, you better vote for me or Trump's going to be president, and Trump building his campaign around, you got to vote for me or it's going to be Hillary. I mean, it would be entertaining.
If only that were not what is actually happening.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to leave it there. We're going to be back Friday, talk about the Democratic debate if it happens. Bernie is still holding out, and we'll preview the New Hampshire primaries. Thanks for watching. Keep reading Latest.com.